the map shows the distribution of the registrants today, and I'm delighted to see truly a global representation. I think every continent is and major region is represented. So about our speakers, I'm delighted to introduce our two speakers. Craig Mills is the CEO of Visuality, a private sector organization with offices in the UK, Spain, and the USA. He has been a data activist for over 20 years. He started his career working for the UK government, mapping and modelling the movement of fish stocks and the fishing fleets chasing them. Later, he joined the UN programme, leading teams of engineers and designers communicating biodiversity and land planning mapping. Visuality works with some of the biggest non-profits and governments, from the White House to the WRI, from Conservation International to CARE, the European Space Agency to NASA. Visuality design applications that shape people and their decisions. And Craig joins us today from Cambridge in the UK. Our second speaker is Francis Gassert. Francis is with the World Resources Institute, a global research organization that operates at the nexus of environment, economic opportunity, and human well-being. WRI is, of course, one of the 5 Eye on Earth Alliance organizations. Francis is focused on promoting open data, data visualization, and research integrity across WRI's programs. His role includes identifying and developing new opportunities to use data to promote environmental sustainability and economic well-being, and on the design and development of WRI's Resource Watch, an open platform for everyone to explore accurate, up-to-date insights about our planet. He worked on the technical development of Aqueduct, WRI's tool for measuring and mapping water risk, as well as on projects across WRI's water program. And Francis joins us today from WRI's offices in Washington, DC. So we will now hand over to our presenters. So Craig, I will make you the presenter, but I think Francis will be the first one to speak. So Craig, if you accept, we should be able to see your screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. Can you see my screen okay?
I see your screen, but it's in the preview mode. Oh, there we go. That's it, yes, full screen.
Okay, great.
Thank
you. Do you want to kick off?
Yes,
thanks everyone for joining. Just so you know who we are, I'm Francis. I'm the American, and Craig's our Brit on the phone. So why distracting people with reality? Well, what this is really about is we wanted to give you a little bit of a background on what we think it takes to get sustainable development information in front of the right people. What's the hidden work of effective design? So Craig was nice enough to ask me to do this presentation with him. We've been working together for 4 years now, and have been working on quite a few different projects. Some of them you might know about, some of them you might not. But if you, many of them are, I think, quite impressive. So perhaps if you, we did a little bit of an analysis recently, and if you added up the total time people have spent looking at our work online, it would be nearly 2 decades of time. We've got probably several million visitors, and that's quite a lot of attention that we're really excited about. This doesn't happen on its own, so we've learned a lot about along the way about what it takes to do this, and there's still quite a bit to learn. So what do you think people say about us? When we build things, hopefully people say nice things. And for the most part they do, especially if you look online. They say things like, "Wow, Global Forest Watch is awesome," or "This is the most beautiful thing I've seen ever." This is remarkably easy to use. Maybe not with quite that much emphasis, but they do tend to say nice things. But the thing is, they don't always. This sort of feedback doesn't always get towards what really goes into these projects. You never see someone say, You never see someone say, wow, interviewing 50 people across 30 countries in 10 languages really made a difference to feature prioritization. You never hear someone say, oh, I love the way the API driving all of WRI's web products are part of a microservices infrastructure. Such a great way to scale the digital services they provide. Hashtag climate justice. And you'll never see the Dalai Lama tweet anything like, whoever managed to convince the 30 stakeholder organizations to agree to move the logos to another page to get out of the way of the workflow needs a bonus. So we'd like to go through a few of the projects that we've worked on and talk about what actually goes on behind the scenes. Yeah, what's that magic behind the curtain? So Craig, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks, Francis. So this is one of our, this is a tweet that we got when Global Forest Watch, one of the largest projects we work on, was launched a few years back, which made us pretty happy. You don't need to be a PhD to use Global Forest Watch. And if we translate the meaning behind this, the way we take it and the way we were hoping to build Global Forest Watch, which I'll show you in a minute, is it's simple to understand, it's easy to use, and it's placed where people are. I'll try and explain some of those things in a little bit more detail. So for those that don't know, Global Forest Watch is it's an initiative with a website which allows you to see where forest loss and gain are happening. Now, if you know anything about Global Forest Watch, you've probably seen a map looking something like this, the famous pink pixels. And I guess the motivation behind the pink pixels was very simple. We wanted people to understand at a global scale where forests are disappearing and where they're reappearing. Now, this is something that's being calculated using satellite imagery, remote sensing for decades. There are many techniques, there are many scientific processes, there are many arguments, there are many ways in which you could go about doing such a task. However, conveying that complexity from the word go was going to cause a problem in helping people understand the very basic problem. Where in the world are forests disappearing or reappearing? And that's what we've tried to do here. So a common design pattern that you'll see in a lot of our work is this idea of a thing called progressive disclosure. It's the idea that you don't need to show all the complexity up front. You show something very simple. Even if behind the scenes the process to reach simplicity is complex, it is possible to get people to understand and to viscerally feel what the information is about, what the message you're trying to convey. So with Global Forest Watch, we started with a map. However, once people were engaged, they can start to drive into the map, and they can start to add extra information about the context by which they see those pink pixels. Why are there gaps in those pixels? Why are they so dense in a particular area? Now, quite often what you see is where there are gaps, they're interconnected with protected areas. So you can start to look at those protected areas. You can even go further than that and start to drill down into specific places on the planet and analyze those places. And then you can do things like subscribe to a place on the map, and when you see a change happening, you get emailed, I think, the results. So you can get an immediate message for what's going on, and you can do something about it, because that's also important. One thing you'll probably notice in Global Forest Watch and in a lot of our other projects is the importance we place on aesthetics. And this isn't just purely to look great and make people go, wow. There is an underlying principle that when design is aesthetically pleasing, when it's easy to use, people have more confidence in the information that they see. That drives the real reason why we pay so much attention to making things work and look great. One of the latest features in Global Forest Watch is, which was a kind of a yearly look at changes in forests, is now the ability to look at changes in forests on a daily basis. on a number of days. So, nothing more than a couple of days, you can start to see changes. And when that happens, what goes from a tool which can be used to kind of inform planning to global or national or regional level can now suddenly be used to guide action directly on the ground. So here you can see those pink pixels are appearing over a very short period of time. You can start to make out things like roads. You can start to make out where people are sort of moving into the forest and starting to clear based on new roads appearing. I think that's pretty powerful. I don't know about you, but when you start to see these things and start being able to use them, what can happen is then you change the way in which the information can be presented, because the people in those places that can do something about it may not necessarily be using a laptop computer. They may be on a phone, they may be on something different. So then you can start to do things like, let's see, you can start to use mobile applications. This is a mobile application we're working with WRI at the moment, which allows people close to forests to get alerts in the area in which they are. Then they can go there, make a report, take pictures, and they can start feeding that back to the appropriate authorities to do something with. And then that data are structurally collected and can be reused to do analysis and reused for advocacy or whatever purpose is required. So you can all of a sudden see that you go from disclosing something at a very high level at a global scale, but because it's built on this strong platform, you can then turn that into mobile application and turn that into kind of very actionable pieces of information. So that's Global Forest Watch. I think hopefully you'll see some key elements in there. The way in which we progressively disclose information, the importance of aesthetics, some of the hidden complexity, which you can get to eventually, is simplified for the purposes of allowing people to get into the tool. And then the idea that context and how people are using information plays an important part in the way in which we design and build digital services.
Thanks, Greg. So our next example will come from DeBry's Aqueduct project, and Daryl thinks this map is great. Thank you, Daryl. But let's see what he's really getting at. I think he's found a story that resonates with him, and he's interested in it not only because it's about water, but because it has data in context. So if you're not familiar with the Aqueduct project, Aqueduct is a global water resources measuring and mapping project. Really what we're getting at is how is climate change and how is socioeconomic development probably going to impact the amount of water that we have for agriculture or for other resources. I think what the secret sauce behind Aqueduct is how much we put into simplifying climate data. So behind these simple maps are something like 20 climate models, many different variables, numerous scenarios. If you're familiar with the CMIP-5 suite, we've got the SSPs and the RCPs, and hundreds of years of data. And what we try to do is mush this all down into 5 colors on a map. So this takes a lot of, I think, it takes a lot of talking to your audience, but at the same time, you have to have a pretty good familiarity with the data itself. So with Aqueduct, we're trying to get businesses and investors to pay attention to how they rely on water in order to get them to think about better managing water resources in their supply chains. And for them, they don't have the time to dig through the CMIP-5 project or the raw climate data, but rather they want something that's relatively simple in order to prioritize where to look. So that's where what we tried to do. The overall water risk map that you see is relatively high resolution, but it gives you an opportunity to dig in. You can play with the different scenarios if you want to. You can go and look at different time steps if you want to, but at the start, it starts relatively simple. The thing is, sometimes this map isn't simple enough, and it helps to simplify even more. So we did that as well. We went all the way down from several dozen terabytes of data to about 160 data points, one for each country. And you can see a nice little map here that The Economist published. And this is the kind of data that really gets widely disseminated, is the most simple form of it. I think this is great because it really shows how you can take something complex and bring it down, but it also gives an opportunity to sort of form a natural version of this progressive disclosure or hierarchical design. Craig talked about this in Global Forest Watch, from the simpler version first, just the pink pixels, going to the more complex, adding layers. Here, here I talked about it the other direction. But if you are a reader or someone who's external, you might first find this map that's just at the country level, and then eventually work your way back up to the more complex version on the Aqueduct platform. And if you're interested in that, dig even deeper into the raw climate data. So I guess the main lesson there is progressive disclosure, add some context to the data, and work your way back up. So the next example that we have comes from the Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness project that we worked on together this past year. And Michaela was wowed by local climate-informed decisions. I guess Michaela lives a pretty boring life if she's wowed by that. But I think what motivated her to tweet this is that she understood the goal of what we were trying to communicate, though, and the way it looked really wowed her. And she also liked that we were working not alone, but with others. We're working with local communities on this project. If you're not familiar with the Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness, this is a project that came out of the White House Climate Data Initiative when several private sector entities approached the White House trying to get more data out of them. The goal of the Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness is to help people have access to and use climate data to better plan for climate change. Now, PrEP is it was a really challenging project, and I think what the key thing here is that it's quite difficult to work together with a huge group of partners to get them to agree on design decisions. But you need to work with folks if you want to be able to really understand the issues as they see them. And you need to work with people if you want to have, if you want to source data from many different sources. You need to work with other people if you want to have the ability to reach out and to engage different communities. Perhaps this is best said in the proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, take many people with you. We tried to take many folks with us, in order to bring this along. And in fact, the project still exists regardless of the change in the U.S. administration. How do we get many people to agree on the design of a platform throughout the process? I think a key lesson here was getting things in front of people as soon as possible. So and iterating early in the process. So we would have monthly meetings with the partnership where we shared wireframes very early on. We did several iterations of design and moved on to mock-ups and finally moved on to development and did iterations there as well. So it was sort of the earlier we could engage, the more we could get people to agree before we put a lot of investment in, and then be able to really dive into the process once we had people on the same page. There's one other lesson that I want to talk about with prep, which was that we learned that in order for a website like this to be effective, we can't expect people to come to us all the time. People have places that they already go when they're looking for information, whether they start at Google or that they look at their local community, or they look at whoever it is trustworthy. So we did one part of this project was an engagement with Sonoma County on helping them to communicate their climate resilience plan and what they saw as the risks of their climate to their agricultural community. It's a wine growing area in the U.S. So beyond engaging with them, what we did is everything within prep was designed to be taken out of prep. So all of the charts and graphs, as well as these interactive pieces, are all embeddable in other places or shareable, so that, for example, the Sonoma County can take what we've done and designed for them and embed it within their own website.
Yeah, I guess it's worth just to jump in there, Francis. I guess with prep and a lot of these projects, the importance of iteration is not to be underestimated. Whether it's in long-term iteration with projects which are spanning many years. So the idea is that we make something, we put it in front of people, we go through a methodical testing process which allows you to gather feedback on how the projects are being used, how easy they are to use, and getting feedback and then feeding that back into the process of continuing to make applications is something that we take pretty seriously. And whether that's at the sort of month-by-month basis, that works, but actually even more fine-grained than that. So yeah. I know with prep, we did a lot of work with almost week by week putting data and designs and information in front of pretty large groups of people, because often that's the best way of focusing down what people talk about. We've all been in meetings where people like to talk. So if there's something to look at and talk about, it tends to drive conversations in a more productive direction.
Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, we have Global Forest Watch. How many iterations of the homepage have we done?
Oh goodness, well, a lot sort of macro level iterations, probably 4, but then there's small tweaks that are happening all the time. Some things are happening that you don't even realize, so changes in design, and doing experimentation on looking at some words versus others, which are put to a randomized group of users over another. Those types of tests are happening fairly constantly with Global Forest Watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the design process for many of these things is never complete, but it's a constant learning and constant improvement.
I mean, there's a general, I guess in some cases, a problem with our space and our sector is that some of these projects are very finite in time. So they're, rather than being treated as an operational service, they're treated as a one-off building of something. And in fact, if you look at the most successful applications on the web, the most successful websites, they are in a constant state of flux because the world and the people that are using digital products are constantly getting more sophisticated, are changing, And so keeping up with those requires like this constant feedback from people and then adjusting applications. That's the great thing about the web as well, so you can adjust it as you go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Should we, so in terms of what we've learned so far, there are some kind of key principles that we've kind of gone over. Just to repeat, so when you disclose information is important, and how much you give people, whether that's drip feed, kind of simplified versions through to complex data, is something that you have to think about. The importance of listening to people cannot be underestimated. It's something that amazingly is missing in a lot of projects, but being able to speak to the person that you want to show the information to and find out whether what you're trying to get is successful or not is important. I'm not sure we've talked about it too much, but if you've probably noticed through most of the applications that are made, there is an element of storytelling in there. The idea of using stories to drive people to understand and to give them that emotional connection with the data and with the messaging that you're trying to get out of that is something that we take seriously. And you'll notice that the ability for others to find stories in that information by connecting them together with other data is something we try and do. We've said it 20 times, I will say it 20 more. Simplifying is critical. A lot of the starting point of these type of applications comes from people, including myself, who are scientists and data scientists, and people that are wrapped up in a world full of particular language and jargon that is very familiar to them. So constantly pushing on simplification is very important. We talked about the challenges and successes of bringing together lots of people and how some of the techniques to do that, which we don't have time in. We could spend another 10 webinars talking about how you do that effectively, but that's a critical part of what we do. And then the idea of putting the data where people are. Often people on the internet are creatures of habits and they go to certain places to find information. So making sure it's there rather than necessarily expecting them to come to you and your website is something we think about a lot. I know certainly with Global Forest Watch, a large proportion of users never even see globalforestwatch.org. They see the same maps and information through other portals like The Guardian or MongoDB or blogs and other websites. So that's important.
Yeah, for Aqueduct, in fact, I think something like 75% of our use of Aqueduct comes through third-party data platforms. So, for example, the data is on the Bloomberg terminal. It's incorporated into a number of environmental and sustainability and governance reporting platforms. And so folks, if they're looking for risk data for commodities, they probably don't want to go to an NGO website to find it. So that's why we try to get it out there.
Yeah, and I guess this is seen a lot in terms of some of the other principles which are probably very familiar with this community around open data, open code, open software, just to make everything as kind of transparent and as open as possible, because other people will think of ways of using data in ways which you haven't even dreamed of. So it's important to make sure that open is in front of most of the things that you do, for us anyway.
Yeah. So we have one last thing to show you. And we think many of these issues that we've talked about are universal. So and we work on more than just forests and water. And we think that the community, if you're interested in the SDGs or if you're interested in many of these other issues, could benefit from having this sort of thoughtful design and innovation put together. So our new project that we're going to talk about just a little bit is called Resource Watch. And what Resource Watch is really designed to do is to help bridge the gap between those who produce data and those who could use it in their decision making. It's an ambitious project with an ambitious goal. And so we have quite a few partners that we're working with in order to bring this together. It's worth saying that none of these projects that we've talked about we've been able to do alone. I only mentioned the partnership with the PrEP project, the Partnership for Resilience and Preparedness. Global Forest Watch has a large and growing partnership, as well as Aqueduct. So we really rely on others to do these things. But without further ado, maybe we can give you a little sneak preview of Resource Watch.
Yeah, okay, so what I'll try and do is this, from what we've said already about some of the core thought processes and principles that we go into making applications, I'll show you how they've manifested themselves in Resource Watch. So one of the first things was this idea of aesthetics and storytelling, creating visualizations that are easy to understand, yet also have an emotional attachment. So one of the elements of Resource Watch is this area called Planet Pulse. And really what we're trying to do here, for the purposes of the webinar, this isn't moving, but this is a moving, beautiful, glossy globe representing, which allows you to represent information from anything from forest fires to conflict locations to you name it, on a globe, which allows you to kind of get this sense from a almost planetary scale, what is happening in terms of resources on the planet. This is, from a data visualization point of view, if you wanted to assess what's happening on the planet, you may not use a globe because you can't see behind it when you're looking at this. However, when we've been doing tests on looking at how people respond emotionally and behaviorally to visualizations, a moving, spinning globe often allows people to kind of get into the data and allows them to it captures them. One of the ways in which we're also, so similar to Aqueduct and similar to many of the other applications, being able to get a quick glance of what's happening is something that we think we can create in a way across multiple data sets. Dashboards are something that are very common, or in this case, dashboards. They are, what we're trying to do here with Resource Watch is use the dashboards to have custom information which allows you to kind of get a picture of your country or your space on the planet. It can be cut and shaped and filtered into kind of the form that you want, whether it's a specific SDG or a specific place on the planet like a country. Using all the data that will be available through the Resource Watch platform, you can show many, many different types of information. Each one of these small cards is an individual data visualization, which is can be altered and changed depending on the data and depending on how you want to visualize it. So simplicity is important there. Then the idea of making it as easy as possible to tell stories with data is something that traditionally is it can be quite difficult, and it still is. The curation of the story, the curation of the data, the working up of information into a form which can be easily visualized is something that is a challenge. So with Resource Watch, what we're trying to do is offer up some beautiful ways in which we can tell compelling stories with data. We're calling those insights. And the insights are something that can combine text, imagery, video with data and maps and visualizations into one place. And so there'll be a number of templates which you can use to do that. Now, one of the pieces that's important, as we discussed, is once you've got a feeling and a sense of what's happening with simplified visualization, if you want to increase context, add extra data, build up your own stories, and then share those stories, this is something that's also important. And the speed at which you can do that is a metric that we're using as a measure of success. So we will be monitoring the usage of Resource Watch, and we'll see how fast it takes for people to go from an insight through to discovering their own stories. And if we optimize around that, the speed at which we can do that and making that as fast as possible, then obviously more stories, more insights get created. And you'll see that one of the ways in which we're trying to drive that increase in speed is to use those cards as part of the exploration of adding data to maps. So quite often on maps you'll see just a list of layers. Whereas what we're trying to do is convey trends in the data before you even put it on a map, if it is mappable data. And this is something that we've tried to do in the Explore part of Resource Watch. As we talked about, context is important in many places in the world. The most common way in which people access information is through a phone, not always a smartphone. But this is something that we're actively doing as well to see how we can convey information in other forms, not just smartphones, but feature phones and other forms too. And that's something that we hope to be part of the release of Resource Watch later in the year. That's all we've got. Francis, have you got anything to add about Resource Watch? I mean,
no, I think the most thought of in Resource Watch has gone into how do we make it almost as easy as possible for people to fall into discovering data, to not sort of not wait for them to have to learn about the information, but to use storytelling or visualization or some sort of emotional connection in order to get people interested in issues, and then just make it as easy as possible to dive in, whether it's downloading the data, doing analysis on the platform, or going to other specific decision-making tools that many of our partners or others have developed.
Yeah, and it is, I think Leonardo DiCaprio keenly noted in his tweet, and this is for another talk, but this is built on for the technically minded and a microservice API infrastructure. What that means is that all the data and the visualizations that are available through the platform can be easily extracted from the platform and put elsewhere into other applications, other systems, other sources. And although this is about data communication, that underlying platform then enables any of the information that's available in things like Resource Watch to then feed into, for a start, other applications like Global Forest Watch or Aqueduct or PrEP or the many others. And beyond that into other applications that, should you choose to create, you can do. So I think, although maybe this is for another webinar, but I think that the underlying platform of open data and APIs is also